7 buildings were thrown up in just 3 months, only to be torn down days after completion. Billions of RMB vanished overnight. Today, we take you deep into this shocking scandal to uncover the dark side of the world's second-largest economy. In Guangzhou, a building was razed barely 10 days after being finished, a striking symbol of China's empty projects and breathtaking waste. It signals a shift from the glory days of massive infrastructure to an era of endless repairs and demolitions. Back in 2015, Xi'an's 118-meter West Central Waterfall, built in 1999, was blown up with explosives, becoming the country's first headline-grabbing demolition. More recently, the Zhi'ai Park project in Baiyun District saw 7 buildings rise in just 80 days, only to be demolished scarcely 10 days after their grand opening. The public is outraged. This project had been hailed as a flagship initiative between Baiyun authorities and Guangzhou Construction Group under the Greater Bay Area Plan, aiming to create a tech hub and talent park. But after its sudden destruction, officials offered only a vague excuse about incomplete procedures. Reporters were stonewalled and residents voiced anger, demanding to know whether the failure lay in approval, construction, or supervision, and who would answer for the colossal waste. On X, one commenter mocked that it didn't matter whose money was burned. What mattered was GDP growth, no matter how hollow. Chinese political analyst Yue explained that these fiascos often follow bureaucratic reshuffles. New officials dismiss old projects, demolish them, and dodge accountability. Rushed 80-day builds often collapse into low-quality construct and demolish schemes that bleed taxpayers dry. In China, where officials are shielded from public elections and only fall in internal power struggles, such wasteful cycles thrive unchecked under the Communist Party. Across China, these rushed demolitions have become synonymous with corruption and vanity politics. Projects are built not for people, but to showcase political achievements. The infamous Hong'an New Area, once touted as a millennium plan, was ridiculed as nothing more than a vanity project. With no press freedom and no democratic oversight, financial black holes continue to multiply. Some buildings are now constructed solely for the spectacle of being demolished, turning waste itself into a political performance. At the end of 2024, Qingzhou County in Taiyuan, Shanxi, claimed to spend nearly 600 million RMB on ecological projects and city parking upgrades. But when the money was traced, it turned out to be poured into fixing government roofs and planting fake palm trees in front of the county headquarters. The palm trees, symbols of Hainan's beaches, cost 13 million RMB and immediately triggered outrage. Under heavy criticism, they were ripped out overnight. In Chengdu's Jinyu district, authorities invested 1.2 billion RMB into an international exchange center, covering 82,200 square meters. The building was decorated with imported marble, handmade wool carpets, and walls lined with crystal. Landscaping alone drained nearly 7 million RMB, while a so-called smart information system consumed more than 120 million RMB. The renovation bill came in at nearly 5,500 RMB per square meter, almost double the actual construction cost. In Suzhou's Changshu City, a park worth nearly 17 million RMB opened in 2024, only to be flattened 5 months later because the land supposedly encroached on farmland. Furious residents slammed officials for wasting money on projects that vanish overnight. In Jingzhou, Hubei, a colossal 57-meter statue of General Shangguangong was unveiled in 2016 with huge state-owned funding and was hailed as a cultural landmark. But just a few years later, Beijing declared it illegal. By 2021, the statue was demolished. Total bill? Over 300 million RMB, most of it taxpayers' money. Wasteful spectacles don't end there. In 2017, Guizhou's Zhanhe County, one of China's poorest regions, sank 86 million yuan into building the world's largest Miao goddess statue. Officials claimed the county had financial capacity, but locals doubted it. The statue still stands, not as a cultural treasure, but as a glaring example of vanity politics. Another Guizhou County, Dongshan, with an annual revenue of only 1 billion yuan, borrowed nearly 200 million yuan to construct the world's first water management tower. When the funding chain broke, construction froze for years. By the time the county chief was removed in 2018, debts had exploded past 40 billion yuan. With just 350,000 residents, each person now carries a debt of over 100,000 yuan. China's obsession with short-lived megaprojects has drained entire communities. In 2012, Shenyang's Green Island Stadium, once Asia's largest indoor arena, was demolished in under a decade despite its 800 million yuan price tag. In 2014, Yunnan's Hekou County launched the 270 million yuan China-ASEAN Tourism Corridor, only to demolish it 3 years later after spending another 300 million yuan. And in Wuhan, the Shunyi Sports Training Center, built in 2009, was demolished in just 10 years to make room for a museum and revolution memorial. Local media brushed it off, saying demolition was unavoidable. But for ordinary Chinese, the unavoidable reality is rising debt, wasted taxes, and leaders more focused on vanity than the people they serve. China's short-lived buildings aren't just a result of shoddy construction. They reflect reckless planning, poor land choices, and local leaders desperate to showcase political achievements. Analysts say the real root lies in constant turnover of officials, each eager to stamp their own legacy. Instead of professional planners, cadres themselves push projects, then tear them down, chasing GDP growth. For decades, this cycle has been tied to land finance. When land values soared, demolishing and reselling property became a cash machine for local governments. In some cities, entire neighborhoods built in the 2000s were rebranded as slums just to justify redevelopment and demolition. At a recent Central Urban Planning Conference in Beijing, the Communist Party once again promised integration between cities and villages and pledged to renovate old housing. But the past 30 years of so-called renewal show a darker reality: low compensation for displaced residents, violent clashes during forced demolitions, and endless unfinished projects left rotting from lack of funds. U.S.-based analyst Tai Shenken pointed out that many developments are little more than tofu-dreg projects, weak, unsafe, and rushed. He argued that the party deliberately fuels the build-then-demolish cycle under the banner of urban upgrades, keeping cash flowing through the real estate sector to stabilize its rule. Another commentator, Tang Jingyuan, warned that while these renewal drives once boosted growth and spurred the property boom, they also created an endless debt spiral. Local borrowing ballooned, and real estate, once hailed as China's growth engine, has now mutated into an economic disaster. By July 2024, property prices in 70 major cities were collapsing, with both old and new homes plunging. Despite this, the party keeps pushing old city makeovers, piling on even more local debt with no clear way out. Meanwhile, opportunistic officials seize the moment to launch short-lived vanity projects, turning demolish and rebuild into a standard political performance. Ordinary citizens are left shaking their heads as freshly paved streets are torn up again and again, sometimes within months. Netizens wonder why funds aren't directed where they're truly needed, blaming chaotic planning and poor coordination between government departments. One online commenter quipped that the Chinese people's patience is extraordinary, but their leaders remain incompetent and unaccountable. Independent analyst CK noted that although Beijing repeatedly condemns wasteful vanity projects, corruption and vested interests ensure the problem never ends. As long as the Communist Party holds power, he said, structural abuse in construction will remain unresolved. It's not only state-led schemes that meet the wrecking ball. Private ventures are also at risk. In May 2024, Shantou authorities demolished a luxury private garden spanning over 8 acres, calling it illegal. Built since 2013 with nearly 1 billion yuan of investment from the Chen family, the project was suddenly erased, sparking public anger and highlighting how quickly years of effort and fortune can vanish under the government's demolition orders. Online users blasted the demolition, saying the project could have been repurposed for public good instead of wasted. But in China, build and demolish has become the quick fix. For decades, flashy projects with sky-high budgets made headlines, yet the real financial black hole is infrastructure itself. Over the past 30 years, China was hailed as a construction superpower, pouring steel and concrete into every corner of the country. Skyscrapers, bridges, tunnels, subways, dams, and high-speed rails once symbolized national pride. But today, these projects are aging fast, shifting the country from construction to costly maintenance. The hidden reality behind rising rail fares, frequent road accidents, and crumbling housing is that the so-called growth miracles are now turning into long-term burdens. By the end of 2024, China's highways will stretch nearly 190,000 kilometers. Yet most have been losing money for over a decade. The debt is staggering, nearly 6 trillion yuan by 2020, and maintenance alone is eating local budgets alive. In wealthier coastal cities, expressways are already entering full-scale repairs, while railways built since 2007 now face expensive overhauls. According to official data, more than 4,800 high-speed trains are under maintenance, with some stations left empty, unused, or even shut down, built for political glory but abandoned soon after. Meanwhile, local debt has spiraled out of control since the pandemic. In 2024, debts surpassed 5 times annual fiscal revenue nationwide, with some provinces reaching 8 times. Over 20 provinces reported deficits above 100 billion yuan, and several exceeded 200 billion. Sichuan topped the list with over 400 billion yuan. At least 1/3 of Chinese cities can't even cover the interest on their loans. The human cost is tragic. In May 2024, a section of the Mailong Expressway in Guangdong collapsed, killing 52 and injuring 30. The road had been open just over 10 years, though such expressways should last at least 20 to 30 years. Experts said the disaster was not caused by nature, but by shoddy construction. Countless other roads across the country need major repairs after only 3 to 5 years of use.